We help small and mid-sized businesses.
IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I am happy to be here because today is Monday. And why am I happy it's Monday? Because here we are in North America, and we are the last broadcast, what would I call it, cycle to our broadcast day. We start every day in Australia, which if you're here in North America like I am, that is at 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening here in North America, and it starts our broadcast day in Australia. Well, now, where we are here is we are now broadcasting on our last series. Now, let's get into it because we're doing something a little bit different this year, and I need you to go immediately to the website because I need you to look at the show notes. IBGR.network, that's IBGR.network. When you get to the website, you're looking for resources. Scroll down, that's a ghost, and what you'll see, it's a mouse over. When you find it, you'll see show notes or notes. Click that, and then the first thing, if you're listening to this live, you'll find right at the beginning of the page, first one in the queue is New World Business Economics Show 1, or NEO. I just feeling in the flow of Matrix right now. And the name of this show is Spotting BS. Now, what are we doing here? I'm doing a series for this season on business economics, real fast. We've done a couple, I'm upgraded them, and I'm going to do a lot more in depth than I've done in the past. My goal here is, as a business owner, entrepreneur, you've got to, number one, spot BS from real stuff. Number two is that if you understand what's going on in the business cycle, that gives you the advantage of being able to understand what is demanded of you now. You know, it's an old joke about, two guys are going hunting, and one guy's got hunting boots on. They're up in Alaska. They're hunting bear. The other guy puts on running shoes. And one guy looks at the other and says, "Man, you can't outrun a bear." And the other guy looks at him and smiles and goes, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just got to outrun you." And that's really where we are here, is that the more equipped you are, the easier it's going to be to outrun your competition. So as they're getting hammered because of things they could have seen coming and didn't react to, and you do, you're going to be left standing. None of these economic downturns, and it looks like one's coming up, are fun. However, for those of you who are in the game, it is a little bit different. All right, now, as you scroll down here, you'll see that this is broken down into 4 segments. By the way, if you're coming in here as a podcast much later on, what you want to do here is that on every page you'll see New Choice of Business search bar. Put in NEO, World Biz, BIZ, ECON Show 1, and Spotting BS. And here we go. So now, I'm going to do this in 4 pieces. We're broken down into 4 podcasts, 4 segments. So number 1 is, segment 1, politicians and talking heads, BS or real stuff. And it's really critical that I understand that, because if you know any basic economics, and that's all I'm really concerned with, is you know enough, you'll be able to smell BS over the radio or over the TV set, because the things that they're doing right now are just absolutely incredible. Now, I was as I was preparing for this today, I came across just an absolutely devastating article that I'm going to recommend that you read or try to find. It's on Zero Hedge, and I'll give you the title because when I read it, every once in a while you read something and you go, "Why didn't I write that?" And this was just unbelievable, because what it described was really not only today's show, but where we're going with this whole thing. And so, okay, got to go next. All right, so as I'm looking, I'll give you the name of it. But what it's talking about is what does economics look like in the post-pandemic world? And it is not necessarily a pretty picture. All right, so as I'm scrolling down here, second page on Zero Hedge, post-pandemic world is one of widespread dependence on government. All right, and so I was writing that article and then I read it. So here's the deal. Politicians, talking heads, people you see on TV, is that this is a great opportunity for you to learn economics. This pandemic is a great teacher. Why is it? And that is because every country, and then within a country, states or provincial governments have handled it differently. If you're in the United States, simply look at how New York has handled this versus Florida. If you are in Australia, take a look at how New South Wales is handling this compared to other parts of Australia. Or I can look at countries. I can look at the United States versus Brazil, or Sweden versus Russia, or India versus Australia. And what you're going to see is different approaches, and I'm not going to look at this in terms of the effectiveness of the approach, because I'm not here to talk about the pandemic or the virus. I'm here to talk about, based upon those government actions, what happened. And that'll tell you a lot, because it's a great economics lesson. So, for example, here's what we know. Governments seek power and use fear and dependence to gain it. Now, the deal is, when I say government, each government will create an agency. That agency becomes a bureaucracy. The goal of the bureaucracy is to continue the bureaucracy. So in initial stages, it tries to grab, after it's formed, it tries to grab more pieces simply because no matter how smart the politicians were, they didn't get it all right. So the initial stages of that bureaucracy is like, cool, there's a couple other pieces we need. Well, once they consolidate their power, then the third phase of this is that now they begin to see what other agencies are doing that they can gobble up. And so bureaucracy's goal is to stay in existence. It's not necessarily, if you got a bureaucracy that's handling poverty, their goal is not to do away with poverty because they do away with the bureaucracy. That's not what they're to do. So they use fear and dependence in order to build on this. You can't do it better than we can do it for you, or if you don't do it, here's what's going to happen. Now, government policy is like double-ended bookkeeping. Now, if you've taken any accounting classes, you know that if you bring in money and let's say you pay money comes into the company, that money goes against account receivable, but it comes out of someplace else. If you pay money out, it's the same deal. Well, government policy is also double entry bookkeeping, is for every addition to government power has a corresponding reduction in individual freedom. Okay, it is a zero-sum game. I would hasten you to take a look at this particular test, and that is look at all of the world economies and take a look at what their GDPs are, gross domestic product, and then subtract their cost of government. And if you subtracted their cost to government, then you would get their true number because the government consumes that, but in reality, it doesn't produce anything. Governments don't produce anything. They don't produce wealth. They're a cost item. Necessary, but they're a cost item. Government views people into two groups, okay? The independent and the dependent. And so the way it works is we take from the independent to give to the dependent. Right? You got people who can't make it on their own, and there is in every society a legitimate small fraction of people who need that type of assistance. All right? No problem. Let's go handle it. But at some point, it begins to reach a kind of a critical mass into where people are now going, well, you know what? I don't have to get out there and bust my backside. I don't have to work hard. I can get a government check. And, of course, I won't get rich. But then a lot of people are, like, really happy with the conditions that they have. And so what you see is the encroachment of these programs until you've got a lot of people on it. In fact, and a good example of that, a friend once said to me, he said, here's what happens. Over time, there's going to be more horses in the wagon than horses pulling the damn wagon. And in any society, that's where we are. In the United States today, for example, half the country pay no federal taxes. All right? They're exempted. So when a politician comes up, like is going on right now, and says, I want to raise taxes, half the country could give a damn. Doesn't affect them. And as a matter of fact, they are the recipients. Yes, raise taxes, because what does that mean? That means more programs for me, okay? And then finally, what's the last thing that we saw here? And that is, in business, there's no pause. The government comes in and says, oh, we got to shut everybody down. We got to pause the economy. Well, guess what, Buckwheat? You can pause what you're doing, but you can't pause what I'm doing because I still have costs. All you're doing is postponing or pausing my revenue. You're not pausing my cost. I still got to operate. Look at what's going on with evictions. Now, I understand the kind of the compassion out there to say, well, people who have been put out of work because of government policy that says that you can no longer go to work and you got to isolate, we got to do something for those people. So not only did we give them money, but we also come up with a moratorium on evictions, which probably is not constitutional, but a different conversation. But guess what they didn't do? They didn't do this for the landlords. Why? Because the landlords owed money to who? The big banks. The big banks have what? Horsepower in Washington. And this is true of any country I go into, this is the same story. And so what has happened is how many landlords have been put out of business because their costs are there. They still got to pay their mortgage. They still got to maintain the building. They still got health and safety standards they got to meet, even though they're not recognizing one piece of revenue. I was talking to a gentleman who works as a contractor for a housing unit. And this unit has 20 apartments in it. 13 of them are under eviction because the people refuse to pay. Why do they refuse to pay? Didn't have to. So that is where we are. So the thing I want you to understand is that governments seek power, and they use fear and dependence to do that. They use fear to take stuff away, to make you more dependent. And the challenge that you have is that once a government program has been put into place, it is practically impossible to pull it out. Why? Because it has a constituency. You see, for the people who don't receive anything from the program, and they try to get rid of it, they don't really have a vested interest one way or the other. But the people who have a vested interest in it are very, very vocal about, you can't take that from me. And so, last couple elections in the United States, we had politicians saying they're going to do away with this, they're going to do away with that, and guess what? They didn't. And the reason they didn't is because they didn't understand the dynamic is that there was a small but vocal population who had now a vested interest because now they had the program, and now they want to keep it. That's why somebody said that the only thing that lives forever is a government program. All right, so that's what we've done with the first segment. Now, when we come back, here's my teaser. When we come back, I'm going to be talking about Adam Smith because my goal today is to build a premise for all the other shows. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Adam Smith because he's kind of the father of economics. And I mean that in kind of literal sense. He didn't discover it. He didn't invent it. But he was probably the first person that we know of in modern times who defined it. All right, you're listening to IBGR. My name is William Eastman. This show or podcast is all about economics, and what we're talking about today is New World Economics. Show number 1, how do you spot BS? And when we come back, I'm going to take you through the things that you need to understand, and I don't care if you took an econ class in college or high school, you don't need them. All you need is what we're going to be doing. Go nowhere. We'll be right